DJ PK, it's 97.5, The Zone, the Utah Jazz. Going to Summer League at the Huntsman Center this year with the Delta Center being rebuilt. Games are Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, and you'll hear a different voice on the PA than you used to. Dan Roberts has hung up the microphone, but before he saunters off into whatever he does that doesn't involve golf, as we found out in the break, we thought we'd have him in for a trip down memory lane here. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, DJ. It's very, very nice to be around you. As I said, I've been watching you for just after you got out of sixth grade on TV,
basically. August of 92, I got here. And little did I know, I got to know you over the ensuing years doing live shots at Jazz games and then killing time before and after and talking to people and getting to know you. Little did I know that you had a long and colorful history long before that.
Yeah, few years.
And we'll dig into that. And I'm curious. I assume a lot of people who, when they meet you and find out, what you've done and that you got a half century of this pretty much, that they would assume that the finals run 97-98 was the highlight and that you probably watched that 10-part Jordan documentary thinking, I wonder if I'm going to be on. Is Mike going to walk by me and I get my second and a half of fame right here?
Yeah, that's accurate. That's very accurate.
You did do that with the documentary?
Yeah, I got on towards the end, as I recall, because after the game was over, Pippen and Jordan went out to center court and fired up cigars. And, we all went, geez, well, I contained myself as best I could. But I stepped over my spot and was out in the court. And then all of a sudden, I was just close enough to hear the engineer there because Costas was saying, and now let's go to Dan Roberts for the trophy presentation. And I'm not even close to the microphone. So he got me there, and I popped over. I just picked up the microphone from the other side and introduced. I just read what I was supposed to, said what I was supposed to say, and that was the end of it. But it was that was a stunned moment. I mean, that whole scenario I relive almost, play by play, moment to moment. It just it never. That's indelibly etched in my brain. That particular scenario.
Certainly, Dan, you would have been able to have relationships with those folks in management for the Jazz and obviously on the team and the coaches and all that. How about visiting players? Because you were there literally their whole careers, every time they came through.
I tried to stay out of their way because the arrogance, and I use that word loosely, but they were focused. They wanted to play basketball. And, the guy with the microphone saying, hey, how are you? Nice to see you. I stayed out of the way of that. The one things, I had a couple of relationships that were pretty decent. Kevin Durant always said hi to me because he remembered me going back to his rookie year. He came out of Texas, and we had the summer league out at the Slick.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting you bring that up, Dan. So he remembers you from Slick.
Yeah.
If we go in and talk to him about a moment from Slick, given the way his mind works, you think he might remember something big if it happened? Because there was a moment, Locke was hired, but he wasn't calling the games yet, so I was doing the play-by-play in the Summer League, and PK was the analyst. And
take that word loosely.
And they had
very loosely.
They had an inbounds underneath, and they throw it out, and there's like 1 second on the shot clock. And Durant's in front of us, out by the three-point line, beyond it. And he rises up, he catches the ball, right? Jumps, catches in one motion, shoots it, banks it, it goes around and around, hits the glass again, and finally goes in. And calling it, and then this happens.
I've seen it all.
That's the analyst. And he says it, again, Yak, with how loud it was.
I've seen it all.
And Kevin was right in front at the penetration line, and I'm telling you, he turned and he looked.
He did look smart.
He looked right over and smirked right at PK.
I've
always wanted to go in and play that. And do you remember that moment? I mean, he's like however many 1,000 points down the road.
He was 19 years old then.
Yeah, he
was. And the one thing he did that I called him on a couple of times after, when the league started going and he had some couple of years behind him, he would always come in front of me and tie his shoes. And it was really bizarre, but I said, do you realize I've been watching you do that for a couple? And then one thing led to another. And he actually stepped out of his basketball persona and kind of was interested in just saying hi to me. It was really cool. And it was just a situation where whenever he would come in, he would give me a shake, and we just, how you doing? I mean, I never went out of my way to bother him, because you just don't do that with guys of that stature, obviously. But at the same time, it was very cool, and he was very open to that. And so was who was the other kid that played with him for the Suns? Is
Booker?
Booker, yeah. He became somewhat open to me as well before the season before the end of this one, and I just got a chance to just say hi, and they accepted that. They were open to that. Asked me how I was doing, blah blah, and again, I stayed way out of the way of players. It just wasn't. They're
in game mode.
Oh yeah,
they're making their living,
and they could care less about. Hey, how you doing? How's the They don't. That wasn't part of the conversation.
One player who, as a visiting player, who was a star and put himself out really quite a bit, I thought, when he was here, both at the media, and he loved Wally when Wally was a security guy at the back door, is Charles Barkley.
Yeah, and
he was always clowning around and interacting with people. Or was he in game mode when he walked by you?
Interestingly enough, he could step out of game mode when he walked by me a couple of times. Yeah. I had my head down. I was reading some copy. He walked by me and he pushed my forehead back. And I almost dropped a sort of a bomb on him, but I refrained from doing it. But he was pretty open with me on certain occasions. It was I kind of liked him. He messed around, but he knew what he was doing. You know what I'm saying? It was just it was a very interesting situation.
Now that it's done, I'm sure you've got a boatload of memories. The one thing I wanted to ask you is, as far as what stands out, and before you answer it, I mean, as Lavelle Edwards is winding down his career, and he announced his retirement in August, and then obviously they had that last season, and people would ask him, what did you take from, phenomenal success? And his answer always stood out to me. He said, the thing I'm most proud of is when I started at BYU, football, it was like a non-event. And as time went on, Saturday home games in Provo, Utah became an entire county, an entire Wasatch Front event. And people would go early, and you'd have the bands playing off to the side and all that stuff. And he spoke how that was what he was most proud of, is that BYU football became an event. And when you started calling Jazz games the way you did as the public address announcer, not nearly as big of a deal as when it ended. And I'm wondering, what would be your response to that, as far as how you firsthand witnessed what it was then to what it became, essentially?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And my quickest answer to that was Larry H. Miller, because when he got a hold of the team, things started happening that he wanted to have happen. I mean, you remember when he would go out in court and shoot 3-point shots with the guys warming up and stuff. But he was active with that, and the end result of the transition to what you're talking about was the building. He put the building together in a year. He just laid his guts out in the street and took on the debt and everything. I mean, he just took hold of what was going on and made it work. And so the end result of that, our first game in the building was, maniacal, but the sound was awful, blah blah, all of that. But at the same time, as the games went on, that's when we had Carl and John, and those were the times that just took off, and that's the most memorable portion of the time that I was there. I mean, and I don't mean to, I'm not trying to not address the other players, but Carl and John made it work in a special way. And that particular scenario, along with the building and Larry's dynamic behavior, basically, if I may use the term, that's created it. That created the role right there.
The night that he put on the jersey and walked over to his seat with the headband and everything and sat down, I don't know if I remember him in the uniform more, or if I remember the look of disbelief and the chuckles from Kevin O'Connor that he would actually do that. There
was one time I remember, and you just flagged my head here. He came there was a timeout, and he came walking across the court straight at me, and I'm going, oh, dear God, please, not me, please. I mean, he was walking right at me, but he stepped to the side. He went around our press table, our scores table, I should say, and he motioned for O'Connor, and there was another person who, I can't remember who it was, but he was ripping him right there on the spot for something. And I just looked up and said, thank you, God. Thank you very much.
You saw that intensity coming.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yeah, and he had fire in his eyes. And again, I'm holding off my descriptive commentary in honor of what's going on here in the on the microphone.
Thank you. I got here a year after DJ, so I got here in '93, and that's a good while ago now, obviously. And I had come from the Los Angeles market where I worked in newspapers.
Yeah.
And was Lawrence, what was his name?
Tanner. Lawrence Tanner.
Right. And so he had a flair and a personality. So I was used to that when I got, and I covered Jordan's first NBA title when I was working for a suburban newspaper there. So I had a lot of experience doing that. And so I was used to people in your position having flair. But I'm wondering, I don't know from 92 prior, and you'd been doing it a number of years, is your style, did you develop that over time? And if so, how did it come about? Was it something you worked on or just happened naturally?
It's kind of a combination, to be perfectly honest with you. The end result of the flair was a byproduct of the earlier days, because that's when all the guys in their goofball screaming and yelling was coming out. And that's when I got into how about this jazz, and that's a story I could explain to you how that happened too. But the end result of that time period going by, I was a little bit out there. But then I got, when we got to the other building, I just said, this is stupid. Why don't you just be intelligent and occasionally bump maybe a humorous comment or something like that? I mean, I just decided to be a little bit more sophisticated, and I use the term loosely because that's not me, but I did the best I could to just be professional and just get it out there, but still be open, still be excited. I don't know if you can grab a hold of what I'm trying to explain.
So you toned it down a little?
Yeah, I did. I really did. And I just decided that after watching a couple of videos of some of these guys, it was just absurd. I mean, they were going out of their way to be idiots, and I had a hard time with that. The one guy, however, that I would give credit to was the African-American kid that did the Pistons. He was funny. He was way funny. He could do a lot of great things, and I there's no way I could duplicate that, not a chance. So it's not that I can't come up with something humorous on occasion, but on the whole, I just decided let's be professional with all of this, and keep it out there, let people know what's going on. And I think I gained a little bit better reputation with that, and not and I'm not being critical of your question, because that's what these guys did way back, and you know that as well. Lawrence, bless his heart, always, when Booney would go down there, and he would also get a hold of Boone and or Thurl when Thurl started doing TV, is Dan still there? I mean, he was trying desperately to catch up to me, and he's still 3 years behind me, basically. So, no, he'll catch, if he stays, based on, can you imagine them for $10 billion for that sale? Jeez.
Oh, I know. Oh, wow. Yeah.
A lot of money.
I could not believe that. And he owns the Dodgers, too, for goodness sakes.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the simplicity in the public address is part of the beauty. And in L.A., and next time you see Dave Fox, because we always do it, whenever we talk about it, it's always, Karl Malone.
Yes.
Karl Malone. That's it. Nothing, no jumper, no how many points, no nothing. Just he'll hit a bucket, everyone's down, and he would go, Karl Malone. And Karl had a couple of big games, and they swept him down there, and it seemed like that was the only two words you heard. The crowd got quiet because they saw what was happening, and they'd run a pick and roll. And Karl Malone.
The other one he did was Laker girls.
Yeah,
Laker girls.
Yeah.
And
total minimalist, though.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Just two words. No verbs.
Yeah, that's it.
No verbs.
That was precisely what he did. He sent me a video congratulating the tenure, et cetera, et cetera. It was very cool. And Thurl was right there with him. he just, congratulations, you did a great job, blah, blah, blah. It was nice. And it just he was so consumed with making sure he was there longer than I was. So that's okay.
Okay. Did you get a trophy for that?
No, not a dang thing, actually.
Will you tell the story? We're going to go to break here in a second, but go ahead and tell the story about bring them on out. How about because you were doing that when I got here, and I've heard other people, say it.
In 1980, the second year after 79, when the first game was, I was looking at a Sports Illustrated, just thumbing through it, and I'll be danged, I crossed paths with a article on the Georgia Bulldogs. And the title of the article was, "How About Them Dogs?" And I looked at that and looked at that and looked at that and said, how about this Jazz? And I tied that in and started using it just from that particular article. And I never even read the article because I didn't care about Georgia football. That didn't mean anything to me. But that particular title was in glaring type all the way across the pages, and I just started tossing it out in the Salt Palace, and it caught. So, and the interesting thing about that, and I don't mean to overwhelm you with small stuff, but we get to a spot just recently, and recently is 4 or 5 years ago. Everybody's on their cell phones and could give a lesser care or concern about how about this Jazz, and then so I kind of let that go, and they tried to get me to bring it back towards the end of the season, but it never rang out because I outlived generations in that situation,
Yeah.
And you got to a spot where the old guys would still. I remember that was but then the younger kids and the younger people just an evolution.
Yeah. All right, we can take a break here. We've got to talk to you about a little. I don't know if you want to do complete list, but I got a bunch of questions, favorites.
You fire away.
Most favorite, least favorite. We'll roll through those next. Dan Roberts joining us in studio. DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
I told you we went to this country writers thing in Nashville where you saw these different people that write hits. But mixed in the middle was this old timer. He sang a song about his dog dying. I'm not kidding. Like there were people going, play a happy song, like yelling at this guy.
Be happy.
Be happy. Guy played like 3 songs and everybody was like, oh, I'm so depressed. Yeah. You know what? Read the room.
Yeah, right.
By the way, and he said before he sang the dog dying song, he's like, nobody's picked this one up. I can't figure it out. I can. The song was called For Pete's Sake, and the dog was named Pete.
It's a little on the nose.
I'm just coming to this theater to rock out on some country I barely like, and they gotta sing about a dog dying.
Dying dog, for Pete's sake.
Oh, it's so bad. So bad, dude.
Hear Jake Scott and Ben Anderson every day from 10 to noon on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Dan Roberts, longtime voice of the Utah Jazz. If you're inside the arena, joining us in studio. Want to talk to you about one of your, I'm sure you always get, what are your favorite games? And I imagine if you list your top 5 games, you better have Bird and Magic and the NCAA title game in there somewhere.
Without question.
Yeah, right? Did you know it was that special? Did it feel that special? It's not like it came down to a buzzer beat or anything dramatic. Michigan State was a better team and won comfortably.
Yeah.
Where does that one rank with all the stuff you've done with the Jazz?
It was up there because when the game was over, I suddenly realized, actually, that's not totally accurate. Down the road after that game, it came to me that this is the beginning of the NBA because they both got drafted first, and then the rest is history. I mean, they both had incredible careers, but it was fun watching them because you could see how good they both were in each of their own ways. I mean, Bird was he was unconscious, dead face. Magic was laughing, and he and Kelser they were close, and just a situation that was fun to watch. But Magic took over. I mean, Magic had the power back then too because he just went out there. But Bird still had a chance to win that game. But he just didn't. He didn't have the same attitude that he when he got to Boston. I hope that makes sense because it was fun to watch. I was I was a total and complete hairball. I had curly hair, full beard, and I got a camera pan one time, and all you could see was my nose, basically. It was very bizarre.
That's a sign of the times, though.
It was, yeah, precisely. Thank you for allowing me to have that. It was so weird. I got my hair curled, and the beard was just so weird. God, it was unbelievable. I was the first time I saw it. I called my wife in, and she said, "God, you were ugly. Jeez, Lee."
Doesn't that seem like such an innocent time? Now they play the Final Four in domes, and here it was just an arena, 15,000 seat, Magic and Bird right in front of you, who became the foundation of the modern NBA, and upon their backs and shoulders is what we have today.
Precisely. I mean, that was exactly the realization I had. And again, I'm not bragging. That wasn't the post-game idea for me. It took a while. Because then because after that I got involved with the Jazz in '79, and then all of a sudden it occurred to me that they were very much a part of that contribution to the success of the league. And now, as you know, it's off the chart.
Yeah, they were like the Babe Ruth of basketball.
Precisely. Oh, absolutely. A perfect analysis right there.
That game was the pivot on which everything turned. The NCAA tournament, the NBA. I mean, it's just incredible that you can just point to 40 minutes of basketball and say right there.
That's exactly my point, DJ. The end result of that particular game created the NBA, and I was just quite amazed with that.
So before you did the Jazz public address, you did the University of Utah public address. Now, before that, how involved were you with the Stars when they were here in the ABA and the red, white, and blue basketball?
Yeah, I started in '70, just after after they won the championship. Grant Nielsen, who used to be here in KSL, long ago in Faraway, was their guy, and I had a part-time air shift at Call. Do you remember KALL 910, and just across the street from the Cathedral? And Grant and I were on the air Saturday. I came in after him, and he just said, I'm going to go up to Seattle. He wanted to get in the Space Needle in Cairo up there, and I said, "Who's going to do basketball?" He said, "I don't know." Ding.
There it is.
Angels.
When you said that, were you thinking me, or it was just a question?
It was kind of a combination.
Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of a combination. I think I could do that, and I think I'll give that a shot.
And you wanted to do it.
Yeah. It just was a situation where it was all brand new, obviously, because you're in front of a crowd. That's a totally different thing than being hiding behind a microphone.
Yeah.
Nobody could throw crap at you. So the end result of that was that was a significant alteration of my future right there.
So do you have crazy stories from the ABA? Because there have been books written about how crazy and wild it is.
It was pretty, you had one question that you gave to me. I mean, I can't remember if it was, no, it wasn't exactly then. We had two officials that came in to the NBA from the ABA, and that was one of them I crossed paths with my stupidity, and I can explain that to you. But the ABA was kind of fun because you could watch guys taking 3-point shots, watching that red, white, and blue spin. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of fun. And the unfortunate consequence of the Stars back then was they just didn't have enough money to, jump into the league. But when the NBA swallowed up the other teams, it was major. And then it was just a matter of time, obviously. And then the Jazz, were part of that, and off that went. But it was fun to watch because you had guys that could play the game as good as the NBA players could play.
That's a fact. I think that gets overlooked. And the way I looked at it, there wasn't that many NBA teams back then. And then in the ABA, certainly you had big-time quality. It's viewed as almost like arena football. It wasn't real football. But the fact is, if you look at some of the talent that was in that league, that was as more legitimate than any alternative league we've ever had in our professional sports scene in this country.
You're on the nose with that. I totally agree with that because, I mean, I watched Booney when he was there. That's the first time he and I got together as acquaintances and friends for a long, long time. I mean, he had moves back then that, he's too old to do now, obviously, but it was still fun to watch him because he had an attitude. He took on players and stuff. It was, Zomo Beatty, Jimmy Jones, who ended up going to the NBA because he was a guard and just incredibly good defensive player. Then Rick Mount, do you remember that name? He played for Indiana. And the Pacers back then and the Stars were always a good combination game because they had players. Willie Wise was pretty dang good. And I can't remember there was one kid that played. McGinnis was his name.
George
McGinnis.
Yeah, he went to Philly. He went to Philly after he got out of the league. So what you just said is precise. They had as good a players as the NBA ever had. And for all intents and purposes, when they swallowed the teams up, the league became better.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the NBA had to expand because the ABA came along and they realized there's tons of players and there's tons of cities.
Yeah,
well,
precisely.
I lived back east at the time as a young. That's where I was born and raised, and Julius Erving was playing.
Yeah, precisely. Great story. You just rocketed me again to another. They had the ABA All-Star game there in the arena at the Salt Palace. And I had a chance to attend, obviously. I didn't do anything because Bill Cosby was there when he was, accepted in the world. But he it was very funny. But Julius Erving was sitting at a table, and my wife and I walked up, and I said, Julius, is it okay if we sat with him and had dinner, and he was cordial beyond belief. It was,
nice.
Back then, he was just getting going. Uh-huh. And then from there on, he took it over, and it just amazing. Our first All-Star game that we had at the arena, he was there, and I reminded him of that moment. He wasn't totally remembering it, but it was. I was speechless, and my wife said, "So you play basketball, huh?"
At the dinner you're talking about, he had the big afro?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was full-blown afro. You're right. Yeah. And I watched I watched him take a couple of shots during games. I was in line with a drive he had that he slammed the ball down so hard I thought was going to pop. But it just was amazing. He could jump.
Yeah, jump in his enormous hands.
Yeah, precisely. That's exactly right. I shook hands with him, and I felt like a 3-year-old, basically. That was, it was really, really quite amazing. But that was significant about my comment relative to how good the ABA was. Right. There were players like him and McGinnis and guys like that were all there ready to.
Dan Issel.
Yeah, Issel, right, precisely. He became a good friend too, and that's one of my other favorite stories with when he was coaching Denver. We can get into that if you want to someday.
Ahead.
Well, that's when Jerry was coaching, bless his heart.
Yeah.
And we were kicking the crap out of Denver, just beating them, just furious. The second half, it just never ended. And they got to a spot where Issel was standing out in front of the Denver bench, just staring straight forward because, we had at least a 30, 40-point lead on them, and just nonstop. And Stockton was still playing. He was still in the game, and Jerry was trying to figure out a way to get him out of there because John couldn't miss. He took a 3-point shot and just drained it. And it just added. And Issel turned to Sloan and looked at him. I said, "I'm not going to forget this."
I remember it.
And Sloan came down, and I wished I could tell you all the things he was saying, but he just ripped Stockton. And our senator, one of the senators from Utah was there. Orrin Hatch. Yeah. He was sitting right there where, Larry used to, or not Larry's seats, but they were
he was
special.
Close enough he could hear Jerry going.
Yeah.
Hear Jerry going.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just had to turn my head to keep from laughing. It was so funny. He slammed his hand down on the table, and he called John a simple, rotten name, but that was another story. It was hilarious, just unbelievable. But I called Issel on that a couple of times afterwards, and I saw him in the hallway. But I told him how far back I went with the Colonels when he played for them, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And he just turned into a super nice guy. He had a basketball persona, and that was that clicked in when he had to play, when he was coaching and stuff. It was really, really, that was a very amusing moment in my career.
Referees are the one thing we haven't talked about. We talk coaches and players, and the referees. Everybody loves to boo the referee. They've been booed a zillion times. You got favorite referees? You ever interact with any of them?
Well, the one I was thinking of was Ed Middleton and the other guy that came over with him that they left the ABA and got into the NBA. And we were in the NBA then, as I recall, and the other official, Jack Madden, I think that was his name. Yeah. We had a situation where we were playing Denver, and we had a situation where there was just a distinct foul right on the baseline to my right, and it was just a Jazz guy who just ripped a Denver guy and knocked him out of bounds, and Madden came over and gave the numbers, and so I said, I was kind of a jerk back then at the moment. I said, oddly enough, the call is on, and he stopped the game and came over and explained to me. He stopped the game and explained to me that if I did that again, that I would be leaving the building. And I said, yes, sir, I would. But I just said, oddly enough, that foul called. I mean, it was blatant. It was blatant, I just really turned dumb on that, but it was still. I figured, what the heck? Let's throw it. We were beating the crap out of him, but he said, "No, you won't." He stopped it. He came from the baseline, walked over right in my face, and I'm going, "Yes, sir." I was normal from there on.
Is that part of the whole evolution of toning it down that you talked about?
To a certain extent, but I decided to be a jerk at that time, and I thought possibly I might get away with a semi-humorous comment, which failed miserably, obviously.
Well, it was humorous. You just didn't get away with it.
No, I did, yeah.
Did you hear from the team?
No, they figured I'm pretty sure that Madden was
he set
all
you
I
straight.
need. Yeah, he did. Yeah, because they had different people managing back then that were, in fact, they had a KSL GM that I think was sort of managing them. I can't remember his name to save my butt, but that's it was just a situation where I was worried about after effects, but they never happened because he didn't know what was going on and nobody could hear what Madden was saying to me except me. But he just realized the game stopped and he came over to talk to me about it.
Oh, that's hilarious. Were there Jazz players along the way who you liked, got to know, had fun stories about, and maybe not the players who played the most or scored the most or went to All-Star games or whatever, and maybe they were 12th men or whatever.
Well, the most significant answer to that, DJ, is Thurl, and he and I clicked, and this is after he came. They won the NCAA back then, in his rookie year and stuff, and I said, hey, do you mind? Can I call you Big T? And he said, yeah. And I came up with a situation. I said T for 2 or 2 for T. I mean, I just bounced back and forth with that. But he enjoyed that, and we just became friends. And we'd give a shake every time he came out on the court, and we still do that to this day and stuff.
Okay, so who has the bigger hands, Dr. J or Thurl? Because I've shook hands with Thurl, and his hand just swallows your hand. It just completely encompasses. Is Dr. J?
They were pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yeah, they were pretty close. I mean, like I said, you feel like a 3-year-old when you're going.
Yep.
We've heard in those early days that the players are more accessible to season ticket holders, towards fans, and all that stuff. I'm wondering, what was your perspective? Have you seen an evolution? Because now, these guys are like mini corporations. They've got so many handlers, and Stockton talks about he was just hoping to make the team. And it was so naive back then to where it is now.
Boy, you're very accurate with that. The evolution of that is precise what you just said. I mean, the players now have more money than there is in the world here. Than if you could add up the wealth of the entire players, I mean, you'd have enough to rebuild a new city without too much of a problem. Yeah. The end result of that is youth and arrogance. And occasionally you'll still see a player that has some respect for the crowd, and he's got a gigantic contract, but he'll walk out and sign an autograph or sign a towel or something of that nature. But on the whole, I mean, the younger players here now with the cash, that scenario is just not there. They have to make appearances and they begrudge that on occasion.
Right.
I heard about that. Yeah,
we've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
know
was-
who was very good recently is Colin Sexton, who
Yeah.
obviously has just gone.
Bless his
Colin
heart.
Sexton
He
would
was a
spend a
peach.
lot of time signing.
Yeah.
And obviously Jordan Clarkson did too.
Yeah. I appreciate you mentioning that because at my last game, when we had the team picture, I was right in center, but he had his arm around me, and he was very, very kind and very, I'm gonna miss you. He said, I was really touched by that. He was a really fine kid. I enjoyed him. Plus his skills were, again, very reasonable.
All right, we can take a break. One final segment with Dan next. Stay with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
Watching an unlikely champion like the Florida Panthers, they sucked forever. One of the most irrelevant pro sports franchises of the last 2 decades until 2022. They're the 8th seed and they end up making a run to the Stanley Cup final. And ever since then, they've dominated this league. It takes time. The Panthers had to be patient. They got the right guy to lead it. It all came together for them. So now we're dreaming of a Stanley Cup here because we have an NHL team. You watch the Florida Panthers do it. The Stanley Cup going places that no one ever thought it would be. Why not here? Why not in Utah? You're thinking about, okay, what could the Utah Mammoth do to make this happen? And now it's a reality. Like, this is something the Mammoth can go do. And I think that Ryan Smith is going to be highly motivated to provide the resources to do it. And I think you got a general manager who could build a Stanley Cup championship team. The parts are in place here to be able to do something like this.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
DJ PK, it's 97.5, The Zone. Dan Roberts, longtime Utah Jazz Delta Center PA voice, joining us here. Going down memory lane. So you just told me a Sloan story during the break. That was hilarious, and I'm glad you edited yourself. But what he said to John Stockton was to the point and hilarious and totally inappropriate.
Yes,
I'm glad you didn't share that.
Yes, it was.
But that was it was a little shocking. Do you have a favorite Larry or Jerry or Frank Layden stories you can share? Because obviously, those are the people who, man, if even one of them doesn't show up, I wonder if the team is still here. Certainly, if the three of them don't show up, it's not here.
Well, the Larry story that I remember just right off the bat, we had, we do the anthem prior to tip-off, et cetera, et cetera. But this gentleman that sang it, African-American, he was a star in the Riverboat that was playing, that play was going on at the same time. And they got him to sing the anthem. Just stunning, unbelievable. And Larry got up and walked across the court to shake his hand after he concluded. I mean, he had that building just riveted. It was just amazing.
Palm of his hand, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It was just amazing. But I mean, Larry walked quickly across because he was the guy that sang "Old Man River" in the play, but his anthem was just stunning, unbelievable. I mean, I've had a couple of situations with that. I mean, the All-Star game, first All-Star game, Boys to Men sang the anthem, and it stunned. It just was amazing. They just, in a circle, they harmonized all the way through it. They had special lighting, and that first All-Star game was dynamite. I enjoyed that immensely. The rest of them you could have.
I was a kid, and we'd moved to Arizona at that point, and that's where I went to high school and college and all that. I first heard sports talk radio. It was on at 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, from 10 to midnight. And I can remember thinking, oh, my gosh, man, that is really something I want to do. I'm like 18 years old, right?
Yeah.
Thinking, this is awesome. And then years later, I get to do it, and I've been doing it a number of years, so I really feel like I've lived out a dream. Growing up, I wanted to play third base for the Dodgers, but something about sucking at baseball got in the way. But I wanted to be in sports. I knew that somehow I was going to be in sports. That's what I had to.
Yeah, I get that, totally.
All I really cared about. And so I got to do it, and I'm still doing it, and I literally consider this a dream job. I'm wondering now that it's done for you, as you look back, did you live a dream?
Yes, I did. Again, part-time ego, relative to being able to talk in front of a crowd and excite a crowd and to watch good players and stuff. Yeah, it was a dream. I mean, as I took you back to that moment at the radio station when I was doing part-time there, I just looked up at the sky and said, that's what I think. I'll give it a shot. And again, the good Lord gave me some vocal cords, and it worked out. I mean, my first game was junk. You could count on that, but I finally got used to it, and finally, I mean, it just became automatic. And what you just said is perfect. I did live a dream. It's okay now, and I when it came down to making a choice on the conclusion, it just I kept thinking back. They're still going to be not that good for a couple of days here. So
for
the
sure.
end result of that,
right?
It's hard to maintain excitement when you have that situation, even though you got to wait it out. So I just took that on, and I just had to fight my ego and get it out of the way, because you get to a spot again where you can talk to a crowd and get them to do things and get them maybe applause and stuff like that. That goes upstairs, and you're pretty powerful all of a sudden.
Special.
And then so the end result of that, I had to work on that big time. So I mean, I'd still, when the season starts again, it's going to be another
an itch.
Yeah. And it's just me having to deal with 40. I mean, a long time with a microphone in my hand.
Yeah.
It just
exactly. Eventually, we'll go through it.
Yeah, I get it. Even as young as you all are.
You're one of the few people who would say that. Thanks for saying that. Thanks for saying that out loud. I know, right? Well, from the front row for Bird and Magic in the NCAA title game to front row for Jordan and the Bulls winning their 5th and 6th titles and mixing in the odd NBA All-Star game, you saw a few pretty cool things there over the years.
Yeah, I did. It really was quite amazing to. Michael shall be the best player I've ever seen. I mean, he had upstairs the power to make him do what he was. He was motivated via his attitude, and watching him play, and just the way he was, he'll remain my most favorite player. The one time that's significant was when he was sick. He had 103 temperature, and he scored 35 on us, and they walked out of the building because he put it out there. But he could make himself do what he wanted to do. And that last shot, I mean, shoving Brian out of the way was just, I mean, I've seen so many versions of that I could, point it out in slow motion by numbers, but it just, that was the end of it right there. He just had the ball, and he knew what was going on, and bam.
One of the humbling things is that, we've had this job, this DJ and PK thing going on for almost a quarter of a century, and it's become an identity. And eventually, as we said, it's going to end and it'll be sad. But you also realize that everything goes on, and there'll be another person sitting at this desk behind this microphone. There'll be another person calling games and doing what you did, and life goes on. It's just the way it is, and we all have to go through it. If you had any opportunity as you look back, and I don't know who the successor is going to be, I don't know if you know, but what would you say to that person to make sure that person understands what he or she is getting into?
That's a fair question. That's one that I haven't thought about, because I hope they're awful. And gee, I didn't mean to say that. I'm sorry.
Jeez, Dan.
So that's why.
There we go. Yeah, right.
Did I talk to you about my ego getting in the way here?
Oh, maybe. You might have mentioned that.
Yeah.
You might have mentioned that.
Yeah, I hope the person who replaces me stinks and fails.
That's where I'm at, sort of. The one thing that's happened, and I could support my idiocy here for a brief moment, but a lot of people have come up to me and said, I've been listening to you since I was 8 years old, and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's nice. I mean, people I don't even know are saying we're going to miss you and stuff. So, all that does is it does a couple of things. It supports my wimpy ego, but at the same time, it makes me sad with the reality of it. So that's why I'm saying I hope they could. The person who sits in that seat's going to have a hard time with me gone.
When PK asked that question, the answer I thought is that I hope whoever does it next enjoys it as much as you did. Because getting to know you and talking to you a little bit before games and then during games, I could feel you feeling the excitement, and I could feel you like you were enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I want to watch people who are doing things that are fun and that are cool. I want to watch them enjoy themselves. I enjoyed watching Colin Sexton when I walked by him in the tunnel and saw the line of kids and saw him signing autographs, and you could tell by his body language. he was going to sign for every kid.
Precisely.
He was going to. He was enjoying himself, and I like that kind of vibe. So hopefully, whoever gets it enjoys it the way you did, and lets go of the artificial stuff and trying to be over the top funny and maybe popping off to the official like you did about. Oddly, that foul was on. Because you were in the moment and enjoying it. And I think that when we're done doing this, we will miss it. And you will miss not doing the games, but you're going to get Saturday nights back.
Yeah.
And I remember going to meet a friend once and going out and like I'm in work mode and I had to go meet them real quick for a dinner. And I was looking at all the people walking up and down the street, all like having a good time. Like, wow, people out here having a good time on Saturday night. And it was a summer night, and I'm missing all this. So we'll get to sleep in. You'll get to do stuff on Saturdays. There is an upside to this. And, obviously you'll miss it, but it's pretty demanding being there. The schedule's unforgiving. It doesn't matter what you've got going on in your life. You have to be there at a certain day and a certain time.
Yeah, and that was during the way they played on certain occasions. That was an invasion of my privacy because I had to be there to watch a bad game or watch them not do what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, the game was over, and I. Thanks for being here, everybody. Blah blah blah. That what you said is accurate, no question.
Doing our jobs, we can miss a game once in a while. When I did the Jazz pre, half, and post, and having to be there at the start and the end, and never ever being able to leave with 5 minutes left because they had a bad night, they got blown out. I understood a lot more why Jerry Sloan got frustrated the way he did. It really all of a sudden made sense to me. Like, man, all this showing up, all this, and this is, and it is a team with 55 and 27. They didn't have that many bad nights. But
yeah, I get that. I get that. It's totally accurate.
It'll be great to see you around town. I hope you still go to games once in a while and say hello when you do.
You guys are great. I appreciate you having me on. It's a situation that is I'm very honored to be around you too.
We got to go to break here. So why don't you send us to break? Well, one more time. You got to bring the Jazz. They want people. Seriously, we've got people lined up to hear you bring them out one more time.
Everybody, how about this, Jazz?